Hello everyone, I'm Sam and welcome to Shadowverse Hit or Miss, Rise of Bahamut edition. This is the series where I go through all the cards from the most recent set and give my thoughts now that the set has been out for a couple weeks and talk about how they're performing in the constructed metagame. Word of warning, these opinions are entirely my own, and I always recommend that you build decks yourself and experiment with cards and make your own choices. Also, metagames do change, so if I say that a card is amazing or that a card is terrible, that shouldn't necessarily influence your crafting decisions unless you happen to agree with my opinion. Let's go ahead and get started with the neutrals. Up first we have Lyriel Celestial Archer, a 2-cost 2/2 with the text Evolve, deal 1 damage to an enemy. This card is perfectly reasonable in Take 2, but as expected in Constructed, she just kind of doesn't do anything. When it comes to Constructed, Lyriel is a definite miss. Moving on, we have Sector, again a 2-cost 2/2. His text, Fanfare, gain +2/+2 if an allied neutral follower that costs at least 5 play points is in play. If you couldn't tell by the number and variety of conditional statements in that Fanfare, Sector is not a card that is making a splash in Constructed. His demands are fairly strict, and even if you built a deck around this effect, including a bunch of 5 or more cost neutral followers just to get you an occasional 2-cost 4/4 doesn't seem like where you want to be in Constructed right now. Like Lyriel, I'm going to go ahead and give Sector a miss for Constructed. Next, we have Hamza, 2-cost 0/2. Fanfare, gain +X/+0, where X equals the attack of the strongest enemy follower in play. So Hamza is guaranteed to be as big or bigger, if you evolve him, than the largest follower that your opponent has. That's valuable. Sadly, removing a single 2-defense follower from the board right now is pretty easy. So even if you had a giant Hamza, it's not like it's going to live to attack anything, and your opponent's just either going to use a removal spell on it, or they're going to trade one of their 2/2s or 2/1s or, whatever else they have in play into it. Again, this is a miss for Constructed. Valkyrie's Spear, 2-cost Amulet. Whenever an allied neutral follower comes into play, give it +1/+0. Worth noting, this card does not work like Royal Banner in that it only benefits followers that come into play after the Valkyrie Spear is already in play. This card is not very good. It is underperforming in both Constructed and Take 2, and it is a huge miss, and maybe the weakest neutral card of the expansion. Next, we have Gourmet Emperor Kai'Sa, 3-cost 2/2 follower. Fanfare, put an ultimate carrot into your hand. Ultimate Carrot is a 2-cost 2/2 follower with the text Last Words, put an ultimate carrot into your hand. What does that mean? It means exactly what you think. You have infinite ultimate carrots, as long as you can play Emperor Kai'Sa and they don't get banished. And of course, if you're willing to spend 2 points per turn playing the carrot back into play. This guy is overperforming beyond what I expected. I thought it would be too slow, too clunky, and that it wouldn't really find a home in Constructed. But it has plenty of legs. I've seen this in Control Swordcraft, Control Bloodcraft, Dragoncraft, and of course Last Words Shadowcraft is where it's probably at its best. So Gourmet Emperor, you are the first hit of this expansion, and I'm happy to see this card. Moving on, we have Goblin Mage, 3-cost 2/2 follower. Fanfare, put a random 2 playpoint follower from your deck into your hand. Anyone who's been playing the ladder recently will know that this card is very, very good, and is assuredly a hit. When I first read this card, I expected that it would put a random 2 or less follower from your deck into your hand, rather than specifically 2, and I thought that was going to make it a lot worse. The fact that it only hits 2-cost followers means that you can grab, you guessed it, Rhinoceroach. That interaction alone has essentially removed Elf Girl Liza from a lot of Forestcraft decks, and given birth to an OTK Roach Miracle variant that is currently very, very hard to deal with. So, Goblin Mage, for being a key part of a Tier 1 strategy, you are a hit. Next, we have Angel of the Word. 3 cost, 2/2 follower, with the text, Fanfare, deal 1 damage to an enemy. This card is deceptively good. I think it is borderline playable and constructed, and I have seen it in a few Dragoncraft and Bloodcraft decks. That said, I still think it's too weak, and that people running it are probably running it as a budget or replacement option, not because it's the optimal card for the slot. So, Angel of the Word, even though you do very well in Take 2, I'm going to go ahead and say that you are a miss for constructed. Next we have Uriel. 4 cost, 3/3. Follower. Fanfare. Put a random amulet from your deck into your hand. Now, I thought this card was going to be total garbage. And the reason for that is simple. The only craft that is actively looking to search out amulets right now is Havencraft. And they already have an excellent tool for doing that in Prism Priestess. But what I hadn't considered is that, well, classes that have amulets but don't have access to tutoring, namely Dragoncraft. And in Dragoncraft, Uriel is surprisingly good. The ability to pull out Phoenix Roost, Dragon Song Flute, or Dragonclaw Pendant actually means that you can make a admittedly Tier 2 or Tier 3 Dragoncraft deck that is fairly consistent when it's built around one of those cards. And she kind of lets you run, essentially, up to 6 copies of any amulet that you need. So Uriel, for beating my expectations and actually finding a home in Constructed, I'm going to go ahead and say that you're a hit, and I hope that you keep only getting stronger as new cards get added. Next we have Goblin Breaker Tina. 4 cost, 3/4 follower. Evolve, deal 2 damage to an enemy follower. Deal 5 damage instead if that follower is neutral. Goblin Breaker Tina is a miss. It is definitely a poor man's Dragon Warrior, and while that's not the worst thing to be, all of the classes that want this effect either have something better they can do. So for example, Havencraft has Priest of the Cudgel, Swordcraft has Floral Fencer, Dragoncraft has Dragon Warrior itself, and the ability to specifically damage neutral followers for a ton isn't all that valuable. I suspect that Goblin Breaker Tina was printed as a safety valve against the neutral craft deck, maybe as a mirror breaker in that matchup. But she's just generally underperforming, and I'm going to go ahead and say that she ended up being a miss. Similarly, Lucius, Goblin Slayer, 5 cost, 3/4, with the text Fanfare, deal 1 to all other followers, deal 2 damage to 1 playpoint followers instead, is also a miss. I thought this guy was going to be playable, if not amazing, but it turns out that the aggressive strategies either, 1, have minions that have more than 1 hit point in play, so for example, the Tempo Runecraft deck that runs Daria usually has minions that have 2 or 3 defense in play. And the deck that has the most one-cost followers in play, Bats and Forestcraft, are fast enough that Lucius can't really interact with them meaningfully. He's just too slow and too weak to claw you back into those matchups. So Lucius, unfortunately, you're a miss. Up next, we have Fortune Hunter Fina. 5 cost, 4/5. Evolve, put a Goblin Mage into your hand and change its cost to 0. So Fina I thought was going to be a miss. I thought she was too low value, or not low value, but I thought she was too slow and didn't have enough immediate impact to justify inclusion in decks. And I was wrong. Goblin Mage ended up being so strong that the ability to play a Fortune Hunter Fina, evolve her, play a Goblin Mage, and then tutor up another 2-cost follower and probably put it into play as well, meant that Fortune Hunter Fina, on turn 7 or later, represented an entire board out of nowhere. In the Forestcraft deck, she's just exceptionally good because getting a Goblin Mage that costs 0 lets you much more easily pump up the attack on your Rhinoceroch, and overall the card is performing well beyond what I expected. Fina is a hit. Next, we have a Call of Cocytus, 5-cost spell. Destroy an enemy follower, enhance 8, then put a Servant of Darkness into your hand. I thought this card wasn't going to be very good, and I still don't think it's very good, and it's a miss in Constructed. Usually decks that want this effect are happy to wait for Odin and just have the unconditional ability to interact with cards like Mordecai and Enstatued Seraph, or if they want to play Servants of Darkness and they're a slow deck, they just run Prince of Darkness himself, or if they're trying to put pressure on their opponent, they just run Dance of Death. So this is a card that is powerful. I mean, it's very powerful if you just look at the card text, but it just doesn't have a niche that it's filling. Depending on what you're trying to do with your deck, there's usually a better option, and sadly, Call is a miss. Next, we have Sahaquiel, 7-cost, 4/4 follower. Fanfare, put a neutral follower from your hand into play. Give it Rush, and return it to your hand at the end of your turn. This is one that broke my heart. I thought this card was going to be really cool. I thought there had to be something broken you could do with it, but I was wrong. This card is a miss, at least for now. Like Uriel, this card has a very long tail in that because it specifies a broad range of interactable cards, the more cards they print that fit into that category, the more options this card has to draw on later in the game's life. But right now, it's just too inefficient and too slow for what it does. I would recommend holding on to them, though. This is definitely the kind of card that can surprise a metagame and create a combo deck out of nowhere. And finally, we have the poster child for the expansion and the big man himself, Bahamut. 10-cost, 13/13. Fanfare, destroy all other followers and amulets. Cannot attack the enemy leader if 2 or more enemy followers are in play. Boy, Bahamut is great. I thought this card was going to be reasonable to above average. I didn't think it was going to be as incredible as it is. And the reason for that is that I thought there would be more hard removal running around, things like Dance of Death. But the fact that he clears the board means that even if your opponent plays Dance of Death, they probably don't have enough play points left over to develop a huge threat themselves. And that's where Bahamut really shines. Yes, he is weak against specifically Seraph Havencraft and Dimension Shift because he can't interact with the things those decks are trying to do, but against any follower-based deck that has to win on the board, Bahamut is the ultimate trump card, and because of that, he is a definite hit. That is it for the neutral cards. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like or subscribe. If you disagree with my evaluations or you want to discuss some cards yourselves, feel free to leave a comment. In the next video, we'll be moving on to talking about the Forestcraft cards. As always, I'm Sam, and I'll see you then.